Trove sounded quite a bit new.
Yeah.
To some people. Can you walk us through what Trove does and what it's all about?
So at Trove, essentially what we've done is we built technology that allowed individuals and financial institutions access and trade global securities. And that might sound really technical, but like if I was to like break it down into like very basic terms, on the individual side, we have a mobile and web platform that allows over 200,000 Nigerians currently trade stocks of companies that they know and love, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles.
Wow.
And we allow them to do that fractionally. So we allow them, own global businesses, from the comfort of their mobile, devices. And on the other side, we also have like technology APIs that financial institutions use to, and when I say financial institutions, like banks, broker-dealers, asset managers, that they use to, provide their customers with the same ability to own, some of the biggest brands in the world.
Well, technically, you're just talking about microfinance, and the average person, the average viewer that want to know that what exactly is microfinancing when we're talking about Trove.
So micro investing, I'll call it more micro investing than microfinance. Yeah, but micro investing essentially is allowing people with tiny amounts of money become a part of the financial system, right? Allowing them become more financially independent, more financially literate. But the micro part just entails or just sees that it's tiny amounts of money, right? So anything micro, as from our perspective, just generally means like tiny amounts.
What's the tiniest amount I can use to invest?
Yeah, so right now we do, I'll say in Naira terms, somewhere around for foreign equities, Nigeria's exchange rate is volatile, but I'll say somewhere around 5,000 Naira. And on the Naira side, on the local side, we allow people to invest with as little as 1,000 Naira.
Okay.
So generally, I think for us, the idea is just to democratize, wealth, irrespective of how much you earn, irrespective of where you reside, irrespective of how buoyant you think you are.
Okay.
A popular thing amongst people when you ask them is, why are you not investing? Why are you not, putting your money in things that can yield interest for you over time? And when I say things that can yield, I'm not saying, MMM or any of those, money sucking schemes that people do these days. But like, reliable and credible type investments, right? The big thing people say most times is, oh, I don't have money. They think they have to have 50 million naira, $5,000, large amounts of money. And what we just did essentially is to say, build things that, or technology that pretty much, thrashes that or throws that idea outside of the window.
Okay.
So right now we have like students empowering themselves financially. You have people that are more, middle class. You have people that previously had no access to the financial system, right? Yeah.
Recently, you launched an API.
Yeah.
Which you briefly mentioned here.
Yeah.
Tell us how it's been received by the financial institutions.
Yeah, it's good. We currently have a number of broker dealers.
Okay.
We have a number of asset managers. We have a number of banks. Financial institutions in general that are building amazing things on top of the API. And at the end of the day, we can't do everything. We can't solve all the problems of the world, right? So to a very large extent, those institutions are also helping with last mile distribution, like to every Nigerian.
Okay.
Trying to take democratizing wealth to every Nigerian.
Well, we have in the past, let me say 5 or 6 years in Nigeria, we've seen an explosion of fintech.
Yeah.
We've seen, like Trove now. Just somebody who's just coming across Trove, and it's becoming. Like me, I'm just getting to know I can invest with 5,000 naira, and then we've seen an explosion of fintech companies in Nigeria. Do you think we have enough, or the ones we have are enough to cover our needs?
Yeah, I think there are bigger problems with. So I think it's not just having more and more fintechs.
Okay.
I think it is, there are problems that go beyond that need solving, right? I think we have a sufficient amount of people, solving very critical problems, using technology.
Okay.
I think there are macro problems. There are bigger problems that need to be solved. Ultimately, there are one or two gaps still that people can fill.
Okay.
But I don't think the last couple of years, the same way we've seen hundreds of fintechs or tens of fintechs, just start to exist. I don't think that same momentum is required at this point in time.
Okay. Now, can you walk us through how a client, for instance, somebody who wants to come to Trove and want to trade with Trove, how do we get onboarded? How does the onboarding process happen?
So typically, it's like I said, everything is entirely technology based. We are on the App Store, on the iOS store. The App Store is the iOS store. So we're on the Play Store and the iOS store. You go there, download an app. Within a couple of minutes, complete a KYC process. And by a KYC process, I mean like uploading your ID and all the basic information that any credible financial institution would ask for. And, within 15 minutes, you're done. You could invest in Naira, and there's a mechanism that could convert your Naira to USD for you on the app, so you get an exchange rate on the app. Or you could also, invest in USD. You pick what you want to buy and trade away and enjoy yourself.
Talking about investing in USD, because I see the fact that the banks, what they give is different from the official rate and from parallel market and even the black market. Because right now we have it's like 4 exchange rates in Nigeria. So, but if I want to invest in USD or I have a USD, at what rate? Is it bank rates, official rates, parallel market, or the black market that I'm supposed to use?
So at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing is just we are a fiduciary of some sort. So what I mean by fiduciary, I might be throwing away 1 or 2 words that might be confusing to people, but by fiduciary, I just mean we are responsible for, all of the people that use the product, right? And we try to keep that trust and build that trust. So we're constantly looking for the best rates for people, working with institutions that could provide best rates. Typically, the best rate you get is CBN's rates, and the worst rate you get is parallel market rates. So most times, more often than not, the rates are somewhere along those lines.
But we see that the banks don't give CBN rates, even as I'm talking to you. So some of the banks don't give CBN; they give their own rates. And if a client encounters such a problem, what does Trove do to make that happen? Ensure that is there anything you can do to ensure that the banks comply?
There's nothing we can do actually. We are not the regulator. The regulator has to do that. But what we do essentially is, try to cast a wide net. And by casting a wide net, working with as many people, or institutions that could help solve that problem of, conversion or as many as we can. So, if one channel is blocked, perhaps there will be another channel for people. But we are not in the business of, determining, what those rates look like.
Okay, now I'm actually going to jump some questions because the reason is, from what you're saying, now the entire world is screaming cryptocurrency. And Nigeria seems to be very resistant to cryptocurrency. In spite of the fact that there are statistics that say we are the 4th or 3rd largest crypto trading country in the world. Now, do you think it's time?
Yeah, so the funny thing is I think last month or so, the SEC actually pushed out some regulation, some draft regulation around crypto, right? I don't know whether it's a draft or it's actually been passed into actual regulation, but they pushed out something, right? And I know quite a number of people within that crypto space that are getting onboarded by the SEC. But I think the stance has changed quite a bit with things like CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and quite a number of countries are taking a very proactive stance to digital currencies, right? So I think the CBN2 and the SEC, they're actually very receptive institutions. I know. Like sometimes it might look like
CBN receptive
to a fair extent. I think it's just the way Nigeria is a very unique place. Also, sometimes I've changed my thinking more from the regulator is constantly trying to kill you to more of a stance of maybe the regulator doesn't really understand what is happening or what is happening in that space. Like fintech in Nigeria is a very nascent, it's a very early space, right? It's not like the US or something where people have been building apps. So if you think back like 10, 15 years ago, there are really no fintech products per se outside of, the interswitches of the world, the remitters of the world. There were really not, Paystack didn't exist, for example, I think 12 years ago. Flutterwave didn't exist, 12, 15 years ago. But there were a lot of financial institutions that existed in the US or in the UK that same time frame.
At the same time, yes.
So their spaces are more mature than Nigeria here. So I feel like the regulators to also have to have that education curve where like, okay, what exactly are you doing? How do we protect like investors or the interest of investors? But then definitely I still think like there's a lot of work to do and they need to take more of a proactive stance. But the sentiment is changing a little bit, and I see them trying to,
talking about the CBDC, Nigeria's own CBDC, the e-Naira.
Yeah.
I have had to talk to people and ask them, have you ever used the e-Naira? And 10 over 10 say no.
I'm 11 over 11 now.
So what do you think the CBN should do? Because from what we see is like they say the e-Naira is working in remote places and all that. How should they push it to people who, like us, who want to use the e-Naira, like people in the cities who want to use the e-Naira? Because the e-Naira actually was done to lure us away from crypto and it's not working actually.
Yeah.
So what do you think the CBN should do?
I think with like anything else, like mobile money or like any of the initiatives that are being driven, like agency banking, any of those things, right? I think there needs to be a huge, that awareness or education gap needs to be bridged.
Okay.
First of all, so there needs to be like an aggressive push, to explain to people what it is even in the first place.
Okay.
I think other than that, there is a perception type roadblock there too as well. How people think about the e-Naira itself that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So people's perception of the e-Naira is a little wonky. That's one thing. The second thing is also like, the education around what digital currencies even are in the first place. And needs to also be bridged quite a bit. So it's not easy work.
Okay.
It's like I said, I try to relate it back to things like agency banking or things like mobile money. Very similar stuff, right? People are aggressively, if you look at people like Safaricom, they aggressively push, the M-Pesa product. They push the M-Pesa product aggressively. Perception around the M-Pesa product is quite, or the messaging around the product is quite clear, even to the most common, to the most common man, right? So I think, the product, there needs to be a little bit more, product thinking, refinement around the product, and ultimately I think that education gap needs to be bridged.
Tell us about Trove University.
Okay, I've been shouting education right now. So the big thing for us is, how can you help people become more financially literate, right? So people talk about things like financial, like I was having a conversation with my colleagues and about something I saw on a panel where, one of the buzzwords being thrown around like these days is like financial inclusion. But the thing is, more than financial inclusion, right? The way we think about it, which is open bank accounts for somebody, force people to have bank accounts, force people to get debit cards, force people to get wallets. More than that, I think a bigger thing is like, how can people actually generate income for themselves?
Okay.
That awareness of like how to build wealth. The thing is like, there are things that you put your money into that are extremely, almost 100%, I wouldn't say recession proof, but like risk proof, right? Like the risk is like mitigated heavily.
Yes.
There are things that you put your money in these days and you get like 15% yield.
Okay.
Right? It's not maybe as a get rich quick scheme, but like a lot of people are not even aware of all of these things, right? They don't know that, okay, these opportunities exist.
Yeah.
So for us, more than like financial inclusion, the way people think about it, you really need to make people literate, like know that, okay, these opportunities exist. This is how to build wealth. This is not even just how to build wealth, it's how to build wealth this sustainable way. Okay. Right? And so that's what we're trying to do with that, right? Essentially, it's like a bunch of courses that teach people like I'd say like from like nursery school. You learn the basics of like investing, you know, the difference between like investing and gambling. What a credible investment should look like, and you know how to pick your investments. Okay. So it's like for beginners to intermediate to advanced type people, and like it's a course that you take all the way. And you know,
what was the requirement for me to be admitted into Trove Invest?
It's free. It's free. There's no requirement. it's just on. It's like everything we do is technology driven, right? Okay. So like you go on the app, you click on Trove University, and then you start your course from beginning to end. And it's not like a very complicated thing. When I say course, it's not the way people think about it. You don't have to have your HND or BSc or OND to do that. Just simply download an app, on board, and it's free. It's free information. We're trying to push out the message of financial literacy as much as we can, and that's the little token that we.
Is Nigeria doing enough to help guys like you, the Nigerian government, for instance? Are there enough infrastructure? Are there enough support in terms of loans, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of even in terms like you're talking about the Trove University now, in terms of learning, people, the government setting up a learning center for people who want to go into technology and say, okay, then somebody came back from Egypt and said, what I saw, Egypt in the next 5 years will overtake Nigeria in terms of technology. Is there enough that the Nigerian government is doing to help guys like you?
Yeah, I think like Egypt is, last I saw, I think they were number one best place to invest in Africa.
Sure.
I think about 5-6 years ago, Nigeria was number 3 on that list. Yes. Nigeria was number 3 on that list. I think Egypt was number 9 or something, or yes. like down, like below Nigeria. Yes. And now Nigeria is off the list, off the top 10.
We're just off the top 10.
So I think government has to take a more proactive stance to helping people, or helping entrepreneurs and business people. And they're trying like quite a number of things, right? But ultimately, these things are driven by people, not governments.
Yes.
One of the things like the NSB, like the Nigerian Startup Bill, I know Lagos too is trying to do something, a startup bill, okay. Which would essentially create some of the change that we hope to see. Things like how do startups get financing? Yeah. Or how does a business get financing? Early stage financing. And how do you scale? How do you register a business? So they're actually trying to make like proactive moves, but those moves are driven like by people, ordinary people like myself, as opposed to government. So I think the best thing, government has no business doing business. Ultimately, right? So I feel like the best thing they can do is just create an enabling environment and be more proactive around the way they interface with people that are working extremely hard trying to fend for themselves, okay. By building businesses. So I think like ultimately like the biggest thing they can do is like have a listening ear, and try to create forums where that interaction can happen. So you can understand a problem from far away, right? Yeah. I feel like when you're in the middle of a crisis or like the issue, you tend to have a different perspective to some of these things. So I guess if they can create a medium through which there is a dialogue or engagement, regular engagement between like government and private sector, or, and when I say private sector, I think of it more from like the SME perspective.
Okay.
People that are on the forefront of a lot of that growth on that side of things. I guess that would solve like for a lot of things.
I asked question. I asked this type of question. The question I'm going to ask you now. I asked it to people like who are tech savvy like you, and the answer is almost the same. That the Nigerian government is tech resistant. Is it true?
Let me see. I wouldn't say resistant. I think a lot of your questions are very interesting, by the way. I wouldn't say resistant. I would say like what I said earlier is, I guess like with things like politics too, a blended like blending, the kind of people that do certain things, I think is necessary. And what I mean by blending is like a mix of like youthful people or young people that are actually on the forefront of all of these things, and maybe people that have more traditional experience, I think is necessary.
Okay.
In politics, in business, in regular corporations, I think it's always very important. I think that's one place where our government is lacking, where you have like a lot of like elder statesmen, or people that have been in government for like quite some time, and you don't have like the same amount of youthful or young people that understand growing trends or what's happening like in the world. So I wouldn't say they're tech resistant. I would say some of these things that we easily understand.
So it's an age thing.
Yeah, I would. That's the simplest answer from my perspective. There are more complicated answers, but it's just like my mom, for example.
Okay.
I have to teach her how to use WhatsApp.
Okay.
And how to. She sends me, oh, I'm trying to do a video call on WhatsApp, and I say, oh, you have to click here and click here and click here.
Okay.
Their generation was quite different, right? So, I feel like that gap needs to be bridged, and maybe perhaps, some of these things that we think are roadblocks would, cease to exist.
Okay. Now,
or at least reduce a bit. So.
Okay. This is probably off Trove, but I'm going to ask you a question because we are in the middle of the heat of politics in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I
hate politics. But no, it's fine.
It's good because you just said that there is an age gap,
yeah.
in understanding technology,
yeah.
amongst government officials. And the next president of Nigeria,
yeah.
What do you think should do? I don't want to say who because
I wouldn't even answer.
But let me ask, the next person who is going to become our president, who is going to be whoever it is, among the top contenders, what do you think should be done to help the fintech space in Nigeria?
Okay, so we've had like I've had like quite a number of interactions with one or two people that are politically inclined, and I pretty much say the exact same thing, right? One thing is if you go to places like the US, the UK, like or I'll just say Europe and America in general, they're heavily skewed towards things like research, for example, and a lot of the advancements you see comes from places like universities or places where that are very research focused or research driven. That part does not exist like here in Nigeria, right? You go through the Nigerian educational system, there are no research grants. There are probably people there that are trying to build maybe apps or on the cusp of like solving like very important problems, and there's really nothing to push them further. So on one hand, I feel like that ecosystem of like people within universities or within research type institutions, I think people need to focus, turn their focus or shine the spotlight on those people again, on those places again. I think a second one is ultimately, like I say, like create an enabling environment for people to do business. And enabling environment, typically means clearer regulation.
Okay.
And regulation, not just for fintechs, like, more recently, things like Gokada or companies like, Gokada, OPay, it was a problem that still continued to exist. So sometimes rather than banning things, I think government should take a proactive stance.
So we ban a lot of things.
Yeah, I think like the bad thing with Nigeria is like we don't understand something, like just ban it.
Yes.
And that doesn't really solve anything. If you see economies, for example, like more recently, like Sri Lanka, for example,
Yes.
right? Where people that are trying to do things because of systemic corruption, people that are capable of doing things are not given a fair chance, and somebody else is pocketing the money, and then it just becomes like a problem that spirals out of control. And then you see situations like Sri Lanka, where like essentially the economy is dead.
Okay.
So I feel like here in Nigeria, just to avoid like all of these things happening, I think government should do the best that they can do to enable people build more. And as you build more, like people would hire more. And as you hire more, people become more financially independent. And there's a correlation between like poverty and crime, right? So the more poor people are, the higher the rate of crime is, right? And so like it's a simple problem. It's a simple solution in my head, but I'm not a president, so I don't know. I really don't know what they're going through. But in my head, it's like a simple solution.
Okay. Does Trove have a competition right now as we're talking about? Are there a competition, and what putting Trove side by side with the competition, how do you feel?
So I think like we are, what's the word, without tooting the horns too much, but we're doing like fairly well. We're doing fairly well. We're the first people within in sub-Saharan Africa to actually build a product like this, right? And when I say product like this, there were bigger asset managers, there were the Stanbics of the world that would say, you need to have millions of naira to be able to trade certain types of financial instruments, right?
Okay.
And we came and tore all of those limitations down, and pretty much allowed people to do things freely, and in a very seamless and easy way. It was very, very tough grunt work, but I think there's a core advantage there from the learning perspective. We have a very solid product, the most undoubted, from where I stand and from like a lot of feedback, the most solid product, and that's a function of time too as well. Outside of that, we have a solid team, a team of people that are, I wouldn't say compassionate or that have empathy towards the average plight of everybody in Nigeria. So the kind of communication you get from our team, you don't get it from a lot of places. From a product perspective, I think we're the most advanced in terms of features. Like I said, as a function of time, we've been able to build certain things. So from a product perspective, we have features that people cannot boast of having. And from a features perspective too as well, we allow people trade more than 10,000 financial instruments across multiple markets. So it's not just Nigerian assets, assets from the US, from the UK, from China as well. So I think diversity of product, empathy of the team, and just the overall product itself is just better than even the closest.
Do you think you have caused a disruption?
People define disruption in a different way, right? But what I can say is we have done something that legacy people were unable to do. And what I mean by legacy people is traditional asset managers, broker dealers. There are some that have existed for 20 years, 25 years, and they had not done this. Nobody had done this prior to us, right? So I don't know what you define disruption as, but for me, we've broken the status quo. We allowed people that have 5,000 naira, 10,000 naira, tiny amounts of money, access things that they ordinarily would never have been able to. We've created a level playing field for people in Nigeria, people within the continent to access opportunities that were open to people like in the US. or people in the UK. Things that, prior to, our existence or, our existing, you could not say you want to own, a share of Amazon, or you want to own a share of, Facebook, or, any of those things, right? It was stuff that was open only to people that were extremely wealthy and people that were of a certain caliber.
Okay.
And had, a certain level of knowledge, right? So we've broken all of those barriers and allow people like access it in a very seamless way, even more seamless than you actually think. So I don't know if that is not the definition of disruption, then I don't know what is, but I'll leave it up to the audience to define disruption.
Okay, let me say I want to invest, and I'm thinking of what time is my investment going to mature. To the person that is watching, the person that is looking at us and wondering, if I invest, how long does it take for my investment to come back to me to have an ROI?
So there are different types of investments, right? And that's why I said like things like Trove University are extremely critical, extremely important. There are things like equities, which are like basic stocks. There are bonds. Some people know some type of investment as fixed income, right? Fixed income essentially means you get, X percent for X naira, right? And things like stocks are more volatile, and stocks go up, stocks come down. Yeah. Bonds are also fixed, so you get a fixed return. There are things like Euro bonds that give you yield or interests. I think interest is the simplest way of putting it on dollars, right? But ultimately, there's no straightforward answer. It depends on what you're investing in.
Okay.
For things like stock, there is no fixed return on it.
Okay.
For things like bonds, there is a fixed yield on it. So like you buy a bond, it's 10% or 15%.
Okay.
And some of these bonds are extremely safe. Like they're sovereign debts, mostly sovereign debt, or when I say sovereign debt, like government bonds and all that type of stuff. And so in the spectrum of risk, those are like the least risky things.
Okay.
So it depends on what you're investing. I think let me not make it too long-winded. It depends on what you're investing in.
Okay. So to to round up, for the person that is watching and say, this is another Ponzi, it's another Ponzi scheme. They have come with all these sweet words. What can you tell them about Trove? Finally.
Yeah. So like Ponzi schemes, like I've done like quite a number. I had like a number of conversations on like flagging Ponzi schemes, right? Okay. And like quite a number of Nigerians have been victim to that, right? So I'm sure like a lot of things I'll say now resonate with people. One of the things would be like anybody that's promising you like extremely high yield, more often than not, red flag, is most likely a scam.
Okay.
And when I say extremely high yield, somebody says, give me 50 naira and I will give you 50% in 1 day, right? Okay. That's extremely high yield. We don't do that here.
Okay.
Second thing is like precedence, right? You need to look at precedence of like the team, the company itself. We have like some of the strongest financial institutions backing us. And that information is public. Also, like the company has to have some form of regulation or, with the SEC.
Okay.
In whatever jurisdiction, at least in some jurisdiction, you have to have some regulatory backing, whether it's by virtue of partnerships or whether it's by, licenses that you have on your own. Because ultimately, like when problems happen, right, regulatory authorities are the ones that would come and look out for the, average person, right? So you really want to look out for those things. So like high yield, extremely red flag, we don't do that.
Okay.
Credibility of the, team and the institution in general, the company in general. We're a very public business. If you do a Google search, you would see the kind of institutions that we work with, where their regulatory licenses fall under, how long these institutions have existed, the kind of products that we offer. Outside of that, you would also see like licensing and even things like insurance on like investments. I think all of those things should give like the average person comfort that, okay, this is not one of those it's not a flash in the pan.
Okay.
Or one of those things that would appear and disappear. yeah, I guess
Okay.
that helps.
But finally, Trove in the next 5 years. What do you think we should be expecting from Trove in the next 5 years? Any products, any new thinking? Any new products?
Okay, so I think one word, next 5 years, massive growth. I think the focus for us for the next 5 years would be more. One thing is expansion.
Okay.
And when I say expansion, like geographical expansion, right? That's one side. I think also from a product offerings perspective, we want to give people more liberty to invest in what they want to invest in. Outside of that, it's just a bigger, a more trustworthy, a more robust brand, a better product, we just continue pushing the idea of financial independence and literacy, to push it, as far as we can. One of our goals is, we think we have Pan-African, vision too as well. It's not just a Nigerian thing, right? So if you're thinking of Africa, for example, you say people say 1 in 3 Africans live below the poverty line, right? So it's not a problem. It's not a Nigerian problem, right? It's more well beyond Nigeria, and so we just want to continue doing our bit to helping those 1 in 3 people jump above the poverty line in any way that we can.
Tommy, it's nice having you on the show.
Thank you. Nice being here.
And that's our show for today. Thank you for watching. See you next time.